We've shown you a lot of text tutorials here on the channel, but what I'm going to do is show you the 10 most popular text effects and how to make them, so let's get started. So for the first text effect, I'm going to go with the classic distortion text effect. Now I'm going to go with more of a bubbly font because I want to fit it in this circle and I want to make sure the roundness kind of fits this shape. So I'm just going to type in distort here, and then all we have to do is go over here into the transformation section on the right side, and I'm going to click distort. When I do that, you can see all of these little anchor points come up, and then I can move and bend them to properly distort the text into any shape or format that I want. Now you can replicate this into any shape you want. You could even put this inside silhouettes of something like animals, and you can create some really cool effects. For example, if I were to duplicate the text and put it down here, I can make it the opposite side, the opposite way, and fill the circle with my distorted text. The second most popular text effect is the long shadow. And what we're going to do is click on this shading button here in the effects panel, and now you can see that as I move the angle around and the offset around, I can make the shadow longer and then move the direction of the shadow to wherever I want it. So I am going to make this text just a little bit bigger with an outline width around it so that it covers the top of that white spot, and then make it a little bit bigger so that the shadow goes off of the page. Then what I like to do with my shadow is take the same color and drag it to the darker side of, for example, this green, and I think that just kind of helps create the overall effect. And now I can move the angle around to be wherever I want. The next text effect is the warped text effect. Now this is going to be different than the distortion. If you look over here on the right side, we have all of these different transformations. If I click on wave, for example, it creates a wave effect that I can then go and move around with these little nodes. If I click on the rise effect, you can see that it properly gives me a risen kind of rised ramp effect for this text, which is also very vintagey, very retro, very groovy, kind of 60s as well. And we have a lot of different versions of this transformation that you can do. So for example, if I were to duplicate this text, let's say 4 times, which by the way, you can hold the Alt or Option key and drag, then I'm going to make the color a little bit different. What I can then do is I can go over to the rise curve and just slide it the opposite direction. So for example, if this was a t-shirt design, I could just do the same thing, flip it the other way, and now I have a different t-shirt design, maybe with a different word. Now we also have a custom warp transformation where you can go in and you can put all of the little lines and the nodes exactly where you want, which you can pretty much do with any of these transformations. Next up is the classic vintage etched effect. So the hero of this is one of our shading tools here on the right side, which is called detailed 3D shadow, or you can also think of it as an embossed shadow. And you can see that as I move the offset and the angle around, we already have this really cool 3D vintage effect. Now the star of the show is definitely this decoration where we have oblique lines, and if I turn them to black, you can see just how easily it is to achieve this etched effect. Then we can go over here and we can play with some of our other colors. I'm just going to set this outline to white, for example, and then I'm going to show you a neat little hack. Once we have our angles exactly where we want to be, for example, I'm going to make this offset just a little bit bigger. What we're going to do is actually copy and paste this text. So then over in the layers panel, what I'm going to do is hide the top one, go to the bottom one, and then I'm going to go back to our effects panel and actually turn off the 3D shadow. So all I have to do there is just click that button, and then it leaves me with those oblique hatched lines. Then when I turn on the top one, I'm going to select the bottom one, and with my arrow keys I can start moving it around to create that second shadow, that second etched shadow like you see here, also kind of reminiscent of the money text effect. So then what I'm going to do is turn off the fill color, so I'm only left with the black etched lines, and there is your vintage text effect. Next up, we have a cut or sliced text effect, and the star of the show is going to be our gradient feature. So if I click here on gradient color, what I'm going to do is just turn off one of the colors. And then if I slide these two swatches close together, you can see the faded transparency goes away and we're left with a very clean line. So now I already have half of a text that looks like it's cut, and you guessed it, we're just going to duplicate this. So I'm going to hit Command or Control C and V, and then what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn off the top layer, select that bottom one, and then just reverse the position of this gradient line. So if I grab the colored swatch that's turned off, I can just flip it the other direction like you see here, and now I have the bottom version of my cut text. So then all I have to do is turn on this top one, and then boom, I can move it to wherever I want. It's fully transparent. I can change the background to be whatever I want. I could even change the angle of this gradient if I don't want it to be straight. Next up, we have the fading text effect. And so very similar to the previous text effect, we're going to go into the text color, we're going to go to gradient color, and then we are going to do the same principle by turning off one of them and keeping the top fill color on. So I've moved that tan cream to the very top. I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the black. And now what we need to do is bring these to a position that I feel like makes sense. You don't want to go all the way 50% because what we're doing is we're creating a faded cut effect. So this one, for example, I've duplicated again, and now I'm going to make the cut even more. So I'm just going to bring back up the color and keep bringing back up the turned off swatch to create that transparent effect. So then I'm just going to duplicate this a couple of more times. You can see exactly what's happening here. We're just making it look like this text has been cut and fading away or falling apart. And if I select any other font, it applies to whatever I want. Now, some of them are going to be weird, so make sure you pick one or do some editing to make sure it fits, but that is super easy to get the color cut effect. Now what we're going to do is go and make a retro stroke colored effect. So over here in the effects panel, I'm just going to turn on outline width. So you see I've selected the shadow, but then I've turned off the offset and I just turned on outline width, and I'm going to pick maybe this kind of retro-y faded blue here, okay? So now I've got that outline stroke perfectly good to go, and I can change the outline width to be whatever I want. I'm going to go with 15 for now, and then the trick here is simply duplicating your text, which I just did with Command C and Command V, and then what I can do is just go and choose a different color, and once I've figured out the color I want, I go back to the effects panel, and then I can just double the amount of the stroke. So I put 25, which wasn't enough, so 30 obviously would be double, and so now you can see I have that second stroke. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and just duplicate this a couple of times so you can see what happens. Now I've got several colors on my text, and I can easily change them down here in the project colors. So for example, if I don't necessarily want this red, pink, I want more of an orange or a bronze or a brown, I can do that easily by switching the colors down here in the color panel. After that, I want to show you a really cool effect here is if you actually start increasing the angle and the offset, you can get some really neat effects. Maybe you're making a sticker or a jersey or a hat or something, and you can see here that as I start moving the angle around and giving it, let's say 100 degrees, I can then go and I can duplicate and do that to all of the other colors, which will make that same effect. So for example, I'm going to go here, I'm going to change the angle to be exactly what it needs to be, and then change the offset so that everything follows that same path, just like this. So next up, we are going to talk about perspective or isometric style text. For this demonstration, you're going to use the distort transformation, but a little bit different. We're going to keep everything nice and clean. So I'm going to grab these two left points, then I'm going to grab the middle point, bring it up a little bit, grab that bottom middle point, bring it down a little bit, and then I'm just going to move these little anchor points here, the little handles, to make sure that they're more straight, and then I'll move finally the far right anchor points so that it fits this shape that I picked from the elements panel. Now you can do this with generally any shape. You could do it in a cube shape or anything like that. For example, I have this letter A here, and I can just use the distort transformation to make sure all of the points align with all of the sides of our isometric or our distorted perspective shape. So our next text effect is the transparent text effect. And so what I mean by that is we're going to have part of the text that is completely transparent so that you can see our nice floral illustration that is behind it. So I have some text here that I'm going to make a little bit bolder. This is probably not going to work with some really thin type or anything like that. So for example, I have my text, and what we're going to do is duplicate it. So I'm going to hit Command C and V. I'm going to drag one of the text elements to the bottom, meaning behind the image. And then what we're going to do is with the top one, we're going to give it a border effect. And for this, I'm going to change it to white. Now you could change it to whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Then I'm going to take the fill and turn it off. So now I have just an outline on the top of our illustration. Then with the back one, I'm going to change it to the same color as the outline, and boom, you have this kind of transparent cut effect. And so what I can do is select both of the text effect, and now when I move it around, it creates that hollowed text effect. The last one we're going to talk about is a grungy, distressed, or faded text effect. Now we already have some fonts like the one I'm showing you here that's already got some distressed pieces missing, but if I go over here into our textures and click on a grunge effect, I can clip it to the content, meaning it will only apply to the text, and then in our blending modes, I'm going to click alpha mask, and you can see here that it removes that texture from the text. Now you could do it this way, but there's actually a better way. So if I'm continuing to use these grunge textures, it is fading some things away, but it's not really perfectly taking it away fully. But we have this alpha mask selection here, where if I click on any of these alpha masks, it completely removes the design from the text. So you can see here I'm clicking through a bunch of these, and it's taking the design away, giving it that grungy or distressed look. Now you can also do this with halftone textures and so many more we have in Kittl. So that was 10 popular text effects that you can easily do in Kittl. I hope you try them out. Go ahead and sign up for free using the link down in the description and have fun.